Now, the first major problem that you may find that you have with your fluency is you may find that you are really happy with your solid vocabulary base. But when you come to a meeting or an interview or any other active spoken English situation, you may find that you cannot use that more difficult vocabulary. And you may find that when you are in a spontaneous situation, you use much more simpler vocabulary. Now, the reason for this is that many courses teach vocabulary in a way that doesn't really help you to get that vocabulary out into the world in an active spoken English situation. So many courses will teach vocabulary, and then at the beginning of the lesson, maybe you will go through some examples of the vocabulary, and you may make some sentences with the vocabulary as well. Now, this is great, and I do exactly the same, but there is a next stage because we need to get you to use that vocabulary without thinking. So you can use it in your active English spontaneously while you are thinking about something else. So what I do in my fluency course is at the beginning of each lesson, we will go through little bits of vocabulary, we will make sentences, and then after that, I will make a list of about 5 or 6 words here on the board, and we will then have a business discussion. And my aim then, my job as the teacher, is to move this business discussion towards using one of these words on my board. And as the student, of course, you don't know that I am moving the conversation towards using one of these words. And then we see if you can use that word again in your active English, in your spontaneous speaking. And when we do that, we tick the word off on the board and we see if we can tick off all of the words on my list. And what this does is it just helps you to start using these words in situations that are not controlled and situations that are more active and more spontaneous, if you like. Now, the second major issue that English learners have with their fluency is they may find that they always make the same grammar mistakes. And you may have the same issue yourself. So it may be something easy. Maybe you know very well that you need to include the S on the end of a word when it is a plural, but maybe you forget to do that every time when you are speaking in your active English. Again, in the presentation, in the meeting, the S may be completely forgotten. Now, the way that we can solve that problem then is exactly the same as what we did with the vocabulary. So I would quite simply write a great big S on the board there, and we would have our big discussion. And every time we use a word that needs an S on the end, if you get it right, I'll do a tick. And if you miss it, I do a little line. And what this does is it helps you to draw your attention towards using this S again in your active spoken English where we are having a discussion about a business topic. What a lot of other courses do, of course, is if they see a student making a grammar error, they will do an exercise on the grammar error, and that doesn't really help the student to use it in their spontaneous English. An exercise is only really useful if you do not understand how to use a certain grammar point. If it's a grammar point like adding the S on the end of the word, of course you know that you need to add the S when you are using a plural noun or when you are using a verb in the third person singular. So an exercise would be completely unnecessary in this case. So what we do there is follow my structure here where we have this big S on the board, have our conversation, and again we test the use of that S in your active, spontaneous conversation. Another issue that a lot of English learners have is that they sometimes find that they only use simple grammar structures in their speaking. So maybe you are quite good with verb tenses, maybe you know how to use the present perfect tense or the present perfect continuous. Maybe if we did an exercise on the present perfect continuous, maybe you would receive 100% and get everything correct. But when you come to speak in your active English, again in the presentation, in the meeting, maybe you only use simple verb tenses like past tense and present tense. Now the key here then is to find certain key instances where you will need to use these more complicated tenses. For example, if we talk about conditional tenses, if we talk about using the conditional, the third conditional, for example, we normally use that when we talk about opportunities which we have missed or opportunities which we have taken. So again, the structure here would be, we would revise the third conditional. We would then write down on the board the very simple structure of how the third conditional works. We would also write the situation when we need to use the third conditional, which is a time when you have either missed or taken an opportunity. And then we'll have our normal discussion. And at some point in that business discussion, I will move the conversation towards talking about a time when you have taken or you have missed an opportunity, and we would see if you can use the third conditional in that situation.